Yeah, hi. My name is Mandar here, and welcome to my PMP sample video. As a part of the sample video, I have selected the project schedule management, which is one of the important chapter from exam perspective. At the same time, it is very critical as a project management. In a day-to-day life, you have to know how the schedule can be controlled, how it can be estimated. It's one of the life skill for any project manager. So what are the processes under schedule management? There are total 6 processes, but most of them are part of a planning process group. So which are those? One is a planning process group. You need to plan the schedule management. What does that mean? Is as a part of this project, is it going to be a agile project, or is it going to be a waterfall or predictive project? And according to, I can select the methodology of scheduling, whether it can be agile, which is rolling wave planning, or it can be the predictive, where I have predict all the activities throughout the project. Once the planning is completed, then we will come to defining the activities. Now, what we are trying to do here is we're just trying to create those activities, right from designing, right from requirement gathering to design to build or construction, then testing, deployment. All these activities will be part of this define activities. Now this is just a primary step. There are multiple steps to make sure it is finalized. And what I need to do next is sequencing. Why sequencing comes in picture? Because as a project manager, I have to know what activity is going to start after which activity. At the same time, which activities can be done parallel, because that is basically that's how my time utilization can be controlled. So I have to have that visibility, and that's where the sequencing comes in picture, which is one other thing is aspect is you need to line up the resources accordingly. So that's where sequencing activities comes in picture. After that, we have estimation. So we have done the activities and sequencing activities, but now what I have to do is to come up with the exact estimate, how many weeks, months, or years it might take. I need to estimate each and every activity, and to add everything together, yeah, I will get estimate of the whole project. But before that, I need to calculate the estimate for each and every activity. So duration will be given for every activity. So we did again defining, sequencing, estimating, and then we are coming here to put everything together to create finalized version of a schedule. And this is where if you use Microsoft Project 365, you will see develop schedule, which will have the activities, which will have the dependencies, which will have the estimation also. So all these five processes are part of planning. This is all good. Then we started the project, and what happens further? As a project manager, every day, every week, every month, we have to make sure that whatever we have planned here, is it going according to schedule or not? For that, under monitoring and control process group, we have to make sure that control schedule process has to be executed. So that's an overview of a project schedule management. Let's go further into these processes. Let's look at what are the key concepts of a scheduling. So scheduling is, it represents, what it represents is each detailed plan. So detailing is very important, whether you do it for months, whether you do it for weeks, or it can be for 2 weeks, which is in agile. But detailed plan is very much important, where it will represent how it is going to be accomplished and when it is going to be accomplished and why we are all doing that. Going back to the definition of a project, which will project will deliver something, either product, service, or a result which is predefined. So I think we discussed that little bit, that what is the methodology, what is the scheduling method we have to use. So that is going to be a very important how you handle the project. It can be critical path method. What is critical path method? We are going to look at in few slides. So hold your horses for a few minutes, And then we have agile approach, where we are planning for few days. Actually it's 2 weeks, which is the most commonly used, which is like 2 weeks will be one sprint. I plan, estimate, everything has to be happening in 2 weeks and give me a minimum shippable product, MSP. So let's come back to the sequencing. um, Whenever there is a, like we saw this, specific processes, it might happen that if you are working in a smaller projects, it will look like this sequencing, because sequencing, estimating, and defining, everything comes together. If you do, actually if you work on the Microsoft project, because all those things are already there, you don't have to actually write the activities first and then estimate. If you are SME, or kind of expert into that area of, and then in which you are creating a project, so you will be doing that all thing together, which is all right. It can happen that it will look like a single process, which is perfectly all right. Now we are not in a perfect world. They will be always. So I ask this question to many people, right? Hey, how many of you have been into projects, whoever, like anyone who is working, which actually started on time, ran on time, and completed on time? And I have not got, actually I have not received any yes answer, because we are not living in perfect world, and there will be dynamics, there will be people on leave, there will be some delays. There's a complex system we are working in. So why, I mean, what is that we need to do in a scheduling, that the schedule has to be remain flexible. So even if there is something, there has to be some wiggle room in a project plan, in the schedule, so that we need to have few things needs to be adjusted, like a knowledge transfer, knowledge gain. So initially you may not have too much idea about the tools, technologies, client processes. So it might take some time, but eventually you will catch up. That needs to be understand. Similar to when your everything is new, your risk understanding can be low or can be high, or you might think this is something very high risk, but it may not be, and vice versa is also possible. So we have to, as a project manager, we have to have that wiggle room for scheduling. Let's talk about little bit on the agile side. Iterative scheduling from a backlog. So what is backlog? So if you have worked on a agile project, so it has a lot of activities. They will put into backlog. It is basically a list of activities. Sometimes it is called as technical date, sometimes called as backlog. Now, let's say I'm starting my project from this Monday for next 2 weeks. I will pick up the highest priority item from that. I will estimate it. Let's say if it is, if it's still high, I have 2 weeks of room, some velocity is there, I will pull few more tasks so that my 2 weeks are perfectly planned. So that is called as rolling wave planning. So I'm just planning for one wave at a time. After I accomplish that, okay, go for next task, next cycle. So these are called as adaptive life cycles or agile, and it is typically used in IT product development. These are called as user stories also. So every user story, so under backlog there's something called as user story always activity, and every user story needs to be accepted by user. So uh, uh, so um, so that user story will always have a story point estimation. It's very interesting concept, but as a PMP exam you don't have to worry about it right now. You start to understand that there is a user story and there is something called as rolling wave planning. A tip from an exam perspective: expect at least few questions on rolling wave planning. So keep in mind this keyword like adaptive, iterative scheduling, user stories. Just keywords are very important from a PMP exam perspective. And why we are using this approach is basically incremental value to the customer. And why? Because so think about, you might be using a lot of apps, and every app goes through like, okay, we have added something for payment by credit card. Next iteration you will have a payment by your UPI ID. Next time there will be something else, right? So incrementally you're delivering to the customer instead of doing it everything in one iteration. So that's where this agile planning comes in picture. And what is the benefit is, it can have a changes. So let's say if I develop something and then I realize, okay, this is the not the mockup which I was looking for as a user, then I always have, because the next iteration is there, I can put my changes and get those changes completed. So that's why any agile project always welcome changes throughout the development of life cycle. Life cycle is in product life cycle. Let's look at few other concepts. uh, on demand scheduling, which is, so what we have seen again, one thing here, the change between thought process is what we have seen or what we do every day is, it's a push base. So somebody has to tell, hey, I'm a user, I have to get this done. And say I'm a project manager, I have to get this done. That's a push. You're pushing the task on somebody, you're assigning, allocating, delegating, all these things, right? Delegating. Now in the Kanban system, what is Kanban? It's actually a combination of two words, which is can and ban. It's basically represents cards and presented. So it's a Japanese word, and this is very famous method, and implemented very successfully in Toyota. It's in manufacturing, by the way. So I was talking about push based system, right? So now this is exactly opposite. It's a pull based system, and it's as I was mentioning about the Toyota, right? So it's a lean manufacturing. So you might be wondering, when you book the Toyota anywhere in the world, it is you as a customer, you are actually pulling it from a lot. It's also called as just in time, JIT. And so Toyota is not keeping any inventory for you. I mean, not for you, but for any customer into their lot. Whenever there is a requirement or the new order, they will assemble it and write there. So that's where the lean is basically minimizing or basically removing all the wastage. So keeping the inventory for longer days is also a wastage. So that's where lean manufacturing comes in. So what Kanban is, it will have a board and it will have all the tasks. Now, if I am the person who is a part of this Kanban team, let's say I'm done with a task 2, I will put it to the done, and I will go back and take the task 5 into being done. So it will have 3 categories. This is like a backlog or to do, being done, in progress, and this is completed. This is some concept where the self-sustaining team, it's not the project manager is every time coming in and telling you, hey, do this, do this, do this. No, it's a self-sustaining team. So every team member will pull his card and pull it to the done, again go back to here, and do the estimation, and all those things. It's very interesting concept. One thing, there is something called as WIP limit. Let's say we are 4 people in this team, right? In my team, I cannot have 10 cards here. That is not going to be possible, right? Because I can work on one task at a time. And the assumption, or the best practice is, you should not have like many cards in progress, then otherwise you're not getting anything done. That's very, I would say bad, but it's not effective way of managing your time. So you should have, so if I have 4 people in my team, then 4 to 6 cards should be there. So as a project manager, you're you need to make sure that WIP limit is known to people, and it should not exceed something beyond 5 or 6. 10, if it comes to 10, that means there is a problem. Let's move on. Planning. So we discussed this little bit. Now we'll go into ETOs. What is ETOs? Input, tools and techniques, and output. So process of planning a schedule management. So as we discussed earlier, that what we are trying to do is establishing, okay, this is going to be a predictive model project. This is going to be rolling wheel. We are going to use Kanban. What methodology we are going to use? So that and regarding to that, all the related policies, procedure, documentation, everything will be defined as a part of this process. What are the inputs? So project charter, which is created at the very initial stage of a project. Then we have project management plan. Now in this case, you might expect that project management plan is there, and then output will be also project management plan, but under that the schedule management plan will get updated. Then we have EEF and OPA. EEF is nothing but the environmental factors, enterprise environmental factors. It can be external, internal. It can be policies which says that, hey, I have to use Jira, for my project management in Agile, or I have to use Microsoft 365 for project management. I have to, have to have monthly meeting by a client. So this can be external, external dependency or external factor put by a client. Similar to that, there is a OPA, which is nothing but the organizational process assets. What are those? Those can be templates, or those can be any assets by a organization. Can be lesson learned. Anything you need for this project, organization always does has a lot of templates regarding to that. So what is that we are going to do as a part of planning? We are going to do expert judgment. As I said, let's say if I'm coming as a PMP project manager, more from a predictive, and then I'm working on building a bridge. So my expert judgment will be important to know that I have worked on similar project, and then I will be working on this project. So expert is basically, whoever the expert into that domain area as well as project management area is very, very important to have. There will be data analysis. It can be something which is analyzing the previous similar projects, understanding the estimate, understanding the estimation models which already exist. So all that analysis will be doing. And meetings slash collaboration is a key. Everything will be done as a part of meeting. You might have seen long meetings, especially when a project goes to like pre-sales stuff, right? Pre-sales activity where you will have project manager, then there is an architect, and then there are a few other team members, sponsor, client representative, everything sit together and then do this plannings activity. So that's where meeting comes in picture. What is the output? Schedule management plan. Let's move on to the next step. What is the next step? Is defining the activities. Now I'm all good. Let's say we go with the predictive model for an example. So what is the process of identifying? It's basically defined. So I need to identify and I need to document that so that everybody is aware of it, and very specific action to be performed to produce the project deliverable. So I know every action is has the consequences on the project. You have to make sure that each and every detail is mentioned, because that's where the role or resource assignment is going to. If you miss something, then that is not going to happen at the end. It might end up in a change request, and there are different implications depending on the environment you are in. So what are the inputs? Project management plan. Under that, the schedule management plan, which we have already defined in earlier processes. Then there is a scope baseline. Now this scope baseline is something which is created as a part of another knowledge area, scope management, where baseline means I am finalizing what is the scope I'm doing. So I need to have that to define my activities. Without that, it's very difficult to define any activities. Then there is a EF and OPA. I'm not going to repeat it because almost all the processes has this EF and OPA. What are the tools and techniques? In tools and techniques, we have expert judgment, decomposition. What is decomposition? Decomposition is basically you are going to divide big activities into smaller chunks, smaller part, and it can go up to any level. Like it practically it can go to 3 to 4 levels, but you cannot just say, hey, I will do construction for 3 months. Okay, fine, but what is that you are going to do in first month? You will define something. Okay, I will construct first 5 kilometer of road. Okay, into that 1 month, what is you are going to do it every week? So everything has to be decomposed to the activity level. That way it is more accurate for anybody to track it later as well. Then rolling wave planning, I think we talk about at a length. So there is something called a sprint planning. So into that, it is typically every whenever there is a sprint is starting, it's like 3 to 4 hours of activity. It's pretty extensive. So you will actually go with a estimation. Is it really going to finish or not? If it is there, then what are the impediments? What are the risks? So all that will be part of rolling wave planning. And then everything is kind of collaboration has to be there, and that's where the meetings comes in picture. So I did all these things. What is that I'm getting out of this process? One is the list of activities, right? So because I mean, of course, I'm the process itself is defining activity. I need to have list of activities, and then I will have the attributes, which is nothing but the extra detail about some activities. Then there is milestone list, right? So you will always do, let's say if you are an IT project and you are into design phase, so completion of design might be your milestone, but you will have at least 15 to 20 different activities to before you accomplish that milestone. So what are the milestones? So you will have maybe if you have 100 activities, you will have 3 to 4 milestones, right? So as a milestone, it's more of a decision maker, and it's more of a, giving confidence to the sponsor that we are on the right track. There might be change request. This will happen when the project is in the operating or executing mode. Otherwise, the change request may or may not happen. And then we are going to update the schedule baseline. So which is like a first version of a schedule under project management plan. All right, let's move on further. Um, Yeah, so rolling wave planning we talked at a bit earlier. So it's a progressive elaboration. So that's also keyword from exam perspective you want to remember. Uh, what it says is a near term. Again, think about rolling wave exactly as it is. So a near term activities can be accomplished, but what is there in far in the future, that is something is not that is not yet planned. So that is in high level WBS. Let's say, okay, we'll do the design or we'll do the deployment, but what activities are there into deployment, I don't know yet. Right now let's focus on design. If we complete that correctly, then go to the construction, then or build, and then go to deployment. So deployment is very very far, so far in the future, whereas my design is pretty much near future. So I can do the WBS. For that, WBS is nothing but a work breakdown structure, which is nothing but the output of the decomposition. Let's move to next process. Sequencing activities, very very important process, and you will have very interesting questions from an exam perspective. What we are trying to find is a relationship between two activities. If there is not, and of course, I mean, there will be always, there is a relationship dependencies, and there are different type of relationship also exist in the activities. So what are the inputs, output, and tools and techniques? Project management plan, and then activity attribute, activity list, and then milestone list. This is something what we created from our earlier processes. There will be assumption logs. Now assumption log can be input because this is again created at the time of project charter. So whenever you are sequencing, because you are yet in the planning phase, the project is not yet started, there will be some assumption you are making to make sure that, let's say for example, network team will be available to resolve my server network related issues. Now that's an assumption. We don't know that network team will be available or not, and according to that, if they are available, then this will take 4 hours. If they are not available, then that is at a risk. So that can go as a assumption. Of course, it will get again rectified from sponsors and whenever you go into execution mode, but that assumption has to be there so that it will get discussed. And then EF and OP is there as usual for all of them. As we said about dependency, how do I know? So it's basically precedence diagram method, right? So there is a precedence of activity A on activity B, right? So activity on node, so that's what AON also called. So but most commonly it is known as PDM, right? So then there is a dependency determination and integration. Leads and lags, we are going to look at it very soon. What is leads? Is basically a next activity can be started a little bit early on the previous activity, and lags is exactly opposite, it delays the activity. And then another tool I think we mentioned about that we can use Microsoft 365 or Microsoft Project, and there are many other open source tools, Trello, Rally, and Jira. These are all called as PIMS or Project Management Information System. So what tool I am doing to track all this. So that's where the PIMS comes in picture. So I'm doing all the sequencing. What is the output? A network, schedule network. In the next slide, we are going to see some examples of that. And then these are the diagrams of it. So it's a schedule network diagram. And then there are some project documents are going to be updated. And these are updates which are already created earlier processes. So activity list and attributes, then log and milestone list. Okay, so we talked about dependencies. So what are the dependencies? There can be 4 different type of dependencies, and expect a question on this from a PMP exam perspective. One is mandatory. Mandatory is something that I mean, as we said, that legally or contractually it is required by nature of work. You cannot, there is no workaround, there is no option. For example, if you have to get government approval before starting any construction, yes, of course, you cannot do that. Otherwise there will be compliance issues, right? The project might get, there might be some notice, or there is a bigger implications to the project. So that's a mandatory dependencies. Sometimes it's called as hard logic. There's no way you can do anything without that. There is a discretionary, which is nothing but a soft logic. Now this can be something which is typically happens into internally. Let's say, hey, if I'm doing a change request, you might have seen, especially, okay, you get these things done, and I will put down the I'll put down the paperwork as we get it. So it's not that, and this is typically happen discretionary basis. This depending on the relationship of the project manager to that other department. You will find these discretionary dependencies, especially if you are internal systems where you can actually, hey, send me the approval, and I'm all paperwork is on the way. It's not unethical. So this is not, we are not talking about unethical something. We are going to follow the process, but those, there can be some soft logic, right? So there is there is a preference, there is a preferential logic into these dependencies. So as a project manager, what we need to do, we have to know, this is not going to be a soft one, this is going to be a hard one. So I have to make sure that I do the priority to the mandatory or a hard logic. So that's what you need to understand. Then similar to mandatory and hard and soft, there is an external dependency and internal dependency. So let's say external dependency is, there is some expert work I need to do. For example, if I'm doing a construction, and I need to put the locks to all the doors, and the locksmith is required, right? Until that, I cannot deliver my work of building, let's say, 100 rooms of a hotel. So that is the external dependency, and I don't have that skill in my in house. I have to buy in a sense, or get somebody paid for it, and get some external party, third party consultant need to be there. So that's the external dependency. I cannot just call somebody, hey, if you're on that project, come in this project. So that cannot be happening. Internal dependency, this is basically a internal team. So it might be internal to the project or internal to the organization. For example, hey, if I want to start this project, you need to have PMO's approval. Like a lot of companies have this PMO department, and depending on that, whether it is supportive PMO, or whether it is um, you know like demanding PMO, they will decide whether you need a PMO's approval to get the project started, right? So that's the internal dependency, right? So it's, now you have to make sure that you understand all dependency, and please expect a question from a PMP exam perspective. There will be 100% questions on these dependencies. What they will give is, typically they will give a scenario, and they will mention that what kind of dependency this can be. Okay, all right. So let's move on to PDM, another very interesting and important concept. So we have identified everything. We have defined the activities, sequence, and estimated, not yet estimated. So we do have activity. There is starting of the project, then there is the ending of project. This is, think over my schedule, right? Activity A is starting, and then B and C both have dependency on A. So they are splitting, or they are diverging. Similarly, so B and D and C and E, this can continue. in parallel, and for F they are merging, they are combining, or they are converging. So diverging, converging, don't expect any questions, but expect you have to write this kind of a diagram in an exam, and then you will have F and G, and then the project will end. So earlier we saw some important keyword of critical path method. So what is critical path? So let's add few numbers here. Let's say I'm doing some estimation and I have added some numbers here. Okay, so let me add numbers randomly: 5, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, so this is going to take 3, let's say, days, just for our convenience. So that can be days, that can be weeks, this can be months, this can be hours as well. And this has these many numbers. Like if you want to put it into a simple example, let's say if I have created the business requirement documentation, this guy like B is, let's say B is going to um, on the activity B, developer is going to work. So he started developing the code and he's going to test the code at the same, oh sorry, review the code. At the same time there is a QA. He's going to write the test cases and review the test cases, and then everything will come together for actual testing, then deploy and end. That's how our project is scheduled, right? So now what is critical path? Critical path is nothing but what is the path which will take maximum days to complete the project. So we have two paths here. One is A, B, D, F, G. That's one path. There is another path A, C, E, and F and G, right? So if I'll just put into number. So if I want to 3 and 5, 8, plus 3, 11, plus 2, 13, and 14. So so maybe ABDFG is going to take 14 days, and 3, 2, 1, 6, 8, and 1, that's a 9. So what is the critical path? So this is my critical path, and expect these questions. What is the critical path on that? Let's talk about something else also. There is something called as float. So what is float? And very important concept from exam perspective. What is float is, so imagine that this activity completed in 3 days. B started on a day 4th, and it is going to take 5 days, and this is going to take 3 days. So let's say if I add this 8 and 3, so F cannot be start until day 11 because it has dependency from this side. Now come to C and E. Let's say C. So if I'm working on C, and not by any reason, but then do I have option where if I get this started little bit delay, let's say I can, this also has to start on 4th, this is started on 4th, this also has to start on 4th, but what if I delay it little bit? Is it okay? Yeah, I mean, if I started on the 5th, then it will take 5th, 7, say, and 8. Still I still have 3 days to go. So these two guys or activities can be floated here and there, right? That is nothing but a float. So it's basically they have a choice that it can get little bit started, delayed, right? So there are two kind of floats. One is total float and one is shared float. But it's basically total float is going to be to be most probably they ask when you say float, it's going to be total float. So what is the, so let's say for activity, so this is going to be 11 days, and this is going to be let's say E is going to be take 1 day. And so I have, so if I start 3 and this is going to take 4, sorry 2, so this comes to a 5th day, right? So E has option of 6 days of a float, so it can go 6 days. Even if it started 6 days late, the project still manages. If it goes beyond that, project get delayed, but it has an option of 6 days, right? Now if this guy, so this is nothing but the concept of a float. It's little complicated, but once you get it, so we are going to another method to see how it can be calculated even more easily. Let's go into further. So let's, before going to that, let's look at the concept of lead and lag. Lead is something where the successor activity can be advanced with respect to predecessor activity. So let's say my coding started from here, right? And this is, let's say, review. So I can start the review maybe, like, let's say this is 5 days activity, this is 2 days activity. I still can have like one day earlier, right? So in this case, what happens? So lead is always going to be minus. So my total time for A plus B is going to be 7 minus 1, because the task B is already started. So this is going to be 7 minus 1 is going to be 6. Lag, yeah, you might have guessed it. It's exactly opposite of lead. So it will delay the activity, right? So let's take example. Let's say if I'm constructing a road, right? So if I'm constructing a road, let's say it takes 7 days, and I'm going to put the paint on it, which is nothing but the lines, like yellow, white lines, so that I know, so that that construction will be finished. Now, once I put the concrete, I have to wait for 2 days to dry it up, and then my task is taking one day only. So if you see task A plus B, it's going to 8 days, but there is a lag. So the actual time will be added to the hour activity. So this is going to be actually 10 days, just because I have A plus B is 8. You cannot do that. So you have to consider leads and lags whenever in the project as well. So I'm not going to spend too much time into here. We talked about is elapsed time is actual time for activity. Du is nothing but the unit, duration unit, whether it can be days, months, or weekdays, or whatever the project, your project is going to agreed on. And then there is a two kind of floats: shared float and free float. Okay, so this is, let's say, real time example of a PMP exam. This is the, this is how they will provide. This is the most common way of giving this example. So let's say, and one my recommendation for all PMP aspirants is mainly, you go to center, because in the center, even though they have started online exam, you have to make sure that you go to center, because they will provide you a notepad, and that's where you can do the drawing activity. Like right now I'm doing it on the PPT, but it is pretty time consuming. So you can see, so we don't have that much time or less luxury of a time during the exam. All right, let's move on. So D, I can see that it is from starting from like it's a starting activity. Okay, so let me quickly delete this, and let's go back to pen. All right, so let's say if I have start. Okay, so I will just keep on drawing this as a D. D is depending on nothing, it's a starting. So then there is a E, so we draw D. E is depending on D, so let's draw E further. Okay, then there is a G, so G is depending on E and F. So F is not there yet, so we can hold on to that for a second. So this needs to be, and again we can come back for that. Then there is a H, which is depending on G, so there is a H. We have better drawing in the next slide, so bear with me for a second. Then we have C depending on H. All right, one more. So there is a long path, looks like. Okay, C is depending on H. Now again it's going back to A, which is again from a start. So these are two activities from a start. What does that mean? Start has two paths here. So one is going to D, one is going to A. So there is another thread or branch or path we started. So F is depending on A and D both. Okay, so I'll define F and depending on F. And now this is depending on A and D. So this is how it is. Okay, and then B is depending on F. Okay, so B is depending on F. And let's go back a little bit. G is depending on E and F both. So now there is a one arrow from here as well. So there are now a lot of combination, and this is ending because there is no more. This is basically end, not E. Okay. So this is how you have to make sure you draw it. Okay. Let's move further. Now let's do the look at the cleaner version. How this is going to look. Okay, before going that, okay, I will explain this in the example itself. So this is how it will look in a cleaner version. It is very important when you have to draw these 3 by 3 squares. Why? I will tell you in a second. But before that, we have to calculate something called as critical path, right? So what are the different options here? I see one is going to be starting with D, starting with A. So there will be 5 different combinations. Let's see, look at those. So one is going to be D, E, G, H, C. That's, of course, that's very straightforward. One is this. Okay. So A, F, B. You have to count those numbers. So I've done that. Let's look at the possible ways first of all. Then there is a F, G, H, C. That's a third one. Then there is a D, F, B, and then there is a D, F, and again G and H and C. So these are the all possible combinations here. Now I have calculated it here right now. So this is how it will look like. So for all those combinations, you just keep on adding the number. So for example, if I go back, so this is 7, 7 plus 3, 10 plus 6 is a 16. So for this, it is going to be 16. For D, E, G, H, C, which is going to be 7, 7 plus 6, 13 plus 5, 18, this is going to be 19. But then there would be some longest path here. So let's look at here. So there is a F, G, H, C, which is coming to 22, and resident critical path is the maximum time. As per the book, it is the minimum time which is required to complete the project, which is basically translated to the maximum time it takes to in the critical path. I cannot assign 12 days to this project because none of the other paths can be continued with that. So that's why maximum number. From a number perspective or maths perspective, just use the maximum number from the critical path, and that is going to be the critical path. Okay. Now, okay, so now we have got critical path knowing. We know the what is the critical path is. So what we are going to do is we are going to calculate the float, and how it is calculated is nothing but the we have to calculate something called as forward pass and backward pass. So this is kind of solved. So let's go back to earlier for a second. Okay. So what is forward pass is nothing but the adding the numbers, and this is basically dividing it from the critical path. Okay, so this is 22. So let's do one path, and then I'll go to the example. So let's say this is starting with a 0. Okay, this both guys will start with a 0. So this activity takes 3 days. This will come to complete in 3 days. This will take 7 days. Now E. So by the time E starts, somebody has already taken 3 days. E will take 4 more days and add it to 7 days. And then G. So let's wait for G here because there is combination. There are 2 paths coming into these things. Okay, so let's wait for it. Let's see how it comes here. So let's say 7, and then there is a 7 plus 3, 10. Now for G, there are 2 inputs, right? One is a 7, one is a F and one is E. So F is not getting completed before 10th day. And this is already completed on 7th day, which is okay. But G cannot start until F is started. So that's where the max number out of these 2 G has to take, which is the 10. So I will get 10 here. Sorry about that. So 10 plus 6, 16. Now 16 comes here, and this is 21. 21 comes here. That's a 22. So this is matching our critical path. So this is forward pass, what we did. Now let's do backward pass. Let's finish the F and B also in a minute. So we have 7. Okay, B, let's finish. So 10. So B doesn't have any other input. So B will take it from F. So it will take 10, and this will take 16, which is one of the path here. Yeah, this one. So 16 is there. Okay. Now at the end, it is 22 days. Okay. So in a backward pass, I have to take the maximum number out of this. Right. Backward pass will be in the down arrow. So let's do the 22 here. So what I'm saying is, even though B can be ended on 16, it could have been ended on 22nd. Right? So this is basically early start and early finish, and this is late start, late finish, and late start. So let's go back for a second. So this is what it is. So early start, early finish, and late start, late finish. And whatever the difference I get, either of this is going to be the float. That's as simple as that. So let's come here. So I do have 22. So now you see that 22 minus 8. So this guy has float of 8. So I do minus 6 and then I get 16 here. Now again, F has two records, right? So it will take and then come back from here. So this is 21, this is 21 to, and so you simply copy the number 21 minus 5, 16, 16 comes here. Now you will see, you might wonder there is no difference here and there is some color change here and there is different color also here. Why? Because you cannot have a float on the critical path. Of course, because that's the path in which, that's a critical path, that's the path you have to take it. There is no way that it can have a float. There is no way you can have any luxury of a float into this. So now earlier we take the, so this is again the same thing, right? F is, for F there are two ways you can go. One is it can take 10, one is it can take 16. But just like we did a max earlier, now we have to do min. So we have to take 10, and 10 to minus 3 is 7, and 7 goes here and goes to 0. So now these guys does not have any of the float because they are on critical path. So now look at it here. Now 10 goes here and 10 minus 7, 3. So 3 is my float for this activity. So 10 minus 4, 6. 6 again goes back to here, and then it is 3 minus 3. So this is also a float of 3. So this difference is nothing but the float. It might be a little complicated, but you might do, when you do it on the paper, it is much easier. Let's look at the cleaner version. Yes, this is how it is. So we did resolve it, but this is how the numbers are going to go there. All you got to float is, so the critical path, no float, but float is nothing but here, here, and here. So this is how it is going to be. What are the tips from an exam perspective? Yes, PDM, you can expect 3 to 4 questions. So once you know this thing, it's, I mean, it's like, it's nothing to be, it's not very complicated. It looks complicated, that's for sure. But make sure you use calculator, because you might, when we do addition very fast, we might go one number here and there that might, go into the incorrect answer. And then questions will always have with a scenario that sometimes, like I saw the table, similar to that, you might have the whole description which says that A, which is taking 5 weeks, is depending on B, which is taking 3 weeks, depending on A and C. So similar to that, they will be. So you just have to read it and come up with a diagram. Then activities with a critical path. I think I mentioned that cannot have a float. There might be just a simple question that they will put something like that, and what is a float for this activity? So for activity G, there is no float. It's on the critical path. You don't have to even think about it and doing all the calculation. If it is on the critical path, you don't have to calculate, just put it as a 0. 0 is going to be the float. Can the float be negative in the runtime or execution time? Yes. So there might be some misleading question that, hey, I'm in execution and I have a float of -2. Is that even a real case? Then the option will be, yeah, that cannot be possible. But the answer is actually, yeah, it is the negative can be possible. Similarly, there can be multiple critical path. It's not necessary it will have one. So let's say it's the same time. It's because we are talking about a time, right? So you might have, if you go back to our example, you might have two paths which has 22 days, which is okay. In that case, both will be critical path, both will not have the float. That is going to be happening. All right, so here I'm ending my test video. I hope you like it, and I would be happy to get a feedback, which I will be happy to work on. And thank you so much.